All right, hello everyone. My name is Professor Derek Anderson, and today we'll go over writing a comparison and contrast essay. And so we'll go ahead and get started. So why do we compare? Why do we compare? First, we want to better understand something like an abstract idea, an event, or even people in order to evaluate something so we can make a clear choice. And we use comparison and contrast all the time in our daily lives. So can you think of some instances where we actually have used comparison and contrast? Okay, so now we have our comparison versus contrast. So comparison, if subjects aren't very much alike, such as bees or people, or computers and the human brain, the similarities are worth nothing. Okay? Contrast, if two subjects are very similar, it's the contrasts that are enlightening, such as those between two cars, two colleges, or two people. All right, so choosing a topic. I got a color going on here. So often you'll be assigned a topic. For those times you must decide what to compare and contrast. You should ask questions about the subjects you choose. Okay. First question. Is this a fair comparison? Here we have a nightclub and here we have a church. The question is this a fair comparison? Okay. Here we have are the following fair comparisons. Why or why not? So the first one, number one, a high school athlete to a professional one. A high school athlete to a professional one. So we are comparing high school athlete, a professional one. Okay? So we're comparing high school athlete to a professional athlete. Next, we're comparing nightlife in New York City to nightlife in a rural community. Okay? Next, your writing to Shakespeare's. Let me get another color there. To Shakespeare's. And next, a BMW to a Mercedes Benz. Okay? So we're asking ourselves, are the following fair comparisons? Why or why not? A high school athlete to a professional one, nightlife in New York City to nightlife in a rural community, your writing to Shakespeare's, a BMW to a Mercedes Benz. Let's move on. All right, second questions. Are there good reasons for comparing these two subjects? If so, what are some of these reasons? Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant. The question is again, are there good reasons for comparing these two subjects? If so, what are some of the reasons? Okay. Next, good reasons to compare. The comparison can aid the reader to make an informed choice. Also, get some colors here. Let's say green. Okay. So again, the comparison can aid the reader to make an informed choice. Okay. And the comparison can provide insights or better understanding about the two things being compared. Okay. So gathering information, one way to ask questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Gathering information, one way to ask questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay. Questions to ask when comparing and contrasting literary texts. First, what does the title tell you? What expectations does it raise? What is the form of the work? What do you know about the writer's style? Who wrote it? And when was it written? Okay, let's take a look at those questions to ask when comparing and contrasting literary texts. Again, what does the title tell you? What expectations does it raise? What is the form of the work? What do you know about the writer's style? Who wrote it? And when was it written? Okay. Again, why was it written? What is described or depicted? Where is it written? Where does it take place? What is the tone? What are the themes? Is there anything about the author's life that impacts the work? How do you evaluate it? Okay, so next, questions to ask when comparing and contrasting people. Let's choose another color here, purple. Okay. How old is the person? Where is he, she from? What is her race, gender, social class? Why is she interesting? What stands out about her? Is he living? If not, when did he die? How did he die? Next question. Is the person famous? If so, how famous? Why is the person famous? Next. What does she do for a living? How would you describe his personality? What does each person know about the other one? How are they related? Are they friends, enemies, cousins, siblings, or business associates? Okay. So next, organizing a comparison and contrast essay. You're going to take all the information, okay? And you're going to organize into the following three groups. You have three group one, group two, and group three. So group one is characteristics, details, etc. that apply to only A. Then you have your second group, those that apply only to B, and group three, those that apply to both A and B. Okay? And so here we have an example of a Venn diagram. Okay, so I'm sure many of you have seen a Venn diagram um, back in grade school. And so, this is group A, and we have group B and A and B. So of course in group A, you're going to talk about what's specific to group A, what's specific to group B, okay? And how are they similar? What similarities do they share? And the similarities that they share will go here, okay? These are similarities in this box, circle. So of course, everything here is details about group A, details about group B, and in the middle is the similarities between the two. Next, we have a chart. In this chart, we have points of comparison, subject A, subject B, both A and B. So this is another way that you're actually able to visualize and outline a comparison and contrast details. So the points of comparison will go here. The details regarding subject A or topic A or whatever you're comparing, the first one will go here. Okay? The details about subject B or topic B will go here. So let's say you were comparing two people. Let's say you were comparing, well, let's just say you were comparing high school sorry guys. And then in box B, you can say, um, let's compare high school to college. Okay. Hope you guys can read that. So this is high school to college. And then in this box here, you're going to put how college and high school are similar. What similarities about high school and college? And they will go in this box here. Okay? Alright, caution. If you are given an assignment that asks you to use your own experience, be careful. Okay? If you are given an assignment, especially as it relates to comparison and contrast, you want to be very careful not to use your own experience. When you use your own experience, then now you're adding your opinion. And then there's a bias because now you're leaning against one side versus the other. Comparison and contrast, we just want you to explain both sides and also how are they similar. Okay? Okay, so let's take a deeper dive into using your own experience. So you have your personal experience. Your personal experience should enhance other evidence, not be the only support for your thesis. So for example, your psychology instructor assigns a written response to an article on the age-old controversy of nature versus nurture. Okay, next, the article claims, based on many studies, the nurture is more important than nature in determining human behavior, intelligence, and personality. Your own experience as a son or daughter, a parent, or just an observer of people convinces you that the article is wrong. Okay? It doesn't matter. Your personal experience isn't enough evidence to refute the article's claim. Your own experience isn't enough evidence to confirm or deny a generalization based on many cases. All right, what to do? So, choice number one, you can choose to leave out your personal experience altogether. That's risky, however, because the assignment says to use that experience. Choice number two, the better choice is to write your thesis to take into account your personal experience. Okay, so example of a thesis using personal experience. While Dr. Knows It All describes the reasons nurture wins over nature in determining human behavior, intelligence, and personality, my own experience as a mother of three children shows that in some cases the issue of nature versus nurture is more difficult to resolve. Okay, so again, with this type of thesis statement, you don't deny Dr. Know-it-all's claims. You acknowledge but raise questions about whether it's right in all cases. To reinforce your personal experience, corroborating evidence from other credible sources is needed. All right, guys, so here we have weak versus effective thesis statements. Let's look at the first one. There are many differences and similarities between the average American diet and that found in most Mediterranean countries. The second one, a comparison of the average American diet with the Mediterranean diet reveals that Americans could reduce healthcare costs simply by altering what they eat. Which one is more effective and why? Let's look. Okay. The whereas thesis. Sometimes, if your paper forces more on the differences, it's helpful to formulate a working thesis using the word whereas. Okay? Sometimes, if your paper focuses more on the differences, it's helpful to formulate a working thesis using the word whereas. Okay. Next, example of the whereas thesis. Whereas the average American diet consists much processed food, high in saturated fat, sugar, and salt, the Mediterranean diet includes mostly fresh foods such as fish, fruit, and vegetables, resulting in a healthier population and, thus, lowering healthcare costs. Okay. Next, getting organized. Two ways to organize: point by point or block. Let's go over the two. All right, next, point by point organization. So, point one or more paragraphs stating the point of comparison and detailing how A is related to it, how B is related to it, how C is related to it, etc. Points 2 and on. For all other points of comparison, the structure remains the same. Define the point and tell how A and B and C, etc. relate to it. Okay, look at that a little bit. All right. So block organization. So in block organization, we have paragraphs that discuss A, paragraphs that discuss B. So block organization works best with papers that are less than 3 pages. Therefore, it doesn't work well in many academic situations. Okay? Right? Combination. In some cases, especially in long papers, or if you are comparing more than two subjects, you may want to begin with the block pattern to give general information and then move to the point by point pattern. Next, transitions. Regardless of how you organize your comparison contrast paper, It is essential that you use good transitions between your ideas in order to guide the reader through your essay. Again, regardless of how you organize your comparison contrast paper, it is essential that you use good transitions between your ideas in order to guide the reader through your essay. Okay, and here we have some common transitions. So we'll go over them really quickly. We have like, whereas, also, similar, as, just, rather, but, nevertheless, on the other hand, and contrast, conversely. Okay. Next, we have an analogy. One good way to think about relationships between two subjects is to work with analogies. An analogy is like an argument that explains something complex by comparing it to something similar. Next, we have an analogy is similar to a metaphor and simile. So we'll go over really quickly what's a metaphor and a simile. A metaphor uses one thing to mean another and compares them. A simile is a form of a metaphor with a difference being that the simile uses the words like or as. And then next, metaphor and simile show how two things are alike. All right, so next, metaphors. All the world is a stage. You are my son. That man is a pig. That snow blanket the ground. That snow blanketed the ground. Similes. All the world is like a stage. You're, you're like the sun to me. That man behaves like a pig. Snow lay like a blanket on the ground. All right, next, analogy. Analogy is more like an argument that explains something complex by comparing it to something similar. It is concerned with the similarity of relationships. And the next example of an analogy, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. That is an example of an analogy. All right, next, how does adding the second sentence explain the simile of the first one? So, for example, it's like killing a mockingbird, isn't it? Why is this an analogy instead of a simile? All right, next. All right, everyone. So this concludes the assignment on writing a comparison and contrast essay. Okay. And so we just have again the last thought of an analogy. You want to think of the difference between a simile, metaphor, analogy this way. Of course, a simile compares two things using like or as. A metaphor exchanges the meanings of one word for another. And last but not least, an analogy explains the relationship between similarities of two things being compared. Alright, please note that you're able to watch this video as much as you can, in order to retain all the needed information regarding writing a contrast and comparison essay. Thank you guys and have an awesome day.